All right. Well, good morning, everybody. We got a packed room here at PSRC. I'm Josh Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Puget Sound Regional Council. I think we had 92 people, if you can believe it, who RSVP'd for the Smart Buildings Workshop. It's pretty staggering. So I know, with traffic, oftentimes we'll have some folks coming in and out, but that's really impressive. Usually if we have a packed room like this here at PSRC, we're doling out transportation grants to the region. So we're not doing that today, but we want to share some best practices. And, our economic development team, we were just out in Eastern Washington, and we visited out in Moses Lake, the BMW partnered carbon fiber plant, where they're building all the carbon fiber that then gets shipped over to Germany to be built in their new electric cars. And what's interesting about that to me is, we know we're a state that has pretty cost-effective electrical utility service compared to other parts of the country. But I think what you'll learn today is that even though our state is known for cheap energy prices and cheap electricity, there's some impressive ways that we can, through efficiency and managing our office buildings, there's things that even we can do better. As a country, we waste about $50 billion a year in our various office buildings, whether it's City Hall or schools, office towers here in Seattle, or other buildings. So this is really about economic competitiveness, and it's the added benefit of doing some great things for the environment. So we have great partners here from Seattle and King County who are going to share a lot of the things that they've learned. I think what's really great about a lot of the work that we've done as an organization with the I-6 Green Challenge Grant is the fact that, we always talk about new buildings being the LEED standard, and whether it's LEED Gold or LEED Platinum. I think a lot of the great things that folks have been learning from this work is whether it's a new building or it's an old building, there's opportunities to manage those buildings and get more out of them. And I think that's something that will be relevant to everybody in this room. A couple of things that I just wanted to highlight. When we worked on this I-6 Green Challenge grant, I referenced our partners of Seattle and King County, but this grant also helped launch the Smart Building Center, which tests new technology in real buildings. That'll be discussed a little bit today. And this grant also helped South Seattle College create the nation's first program to train people to run smart building technology. So just some specific tangible outcomes from this work that I think are opportunities that we need to further leverage as a region. Before I hand things over, I want to recognize all of our elected officials that are here. What's really great is all 4 counties of our region are here today. And so to our elected officials, I know I'll skip some folks because not all of you necessarily RSVP, but could you just raise your hands and we can recognize you? So thanks for being here. We'll probably have some more stuck in traffic that are going to be getting here in a little bit. I know how that goes. But thanks for taking the time. And, I know we also have a lot of staff from our various government agencies in the region here, along with other partners. So, thanks for being here as well. So with that, I'll hand things over to Sasha Anderson.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Sasha Anderson. I work with the Economic Development Department here at PSRC, and I'm the organizer of this workshop along with Stephanie Gowing at the City of Seattle. You might be wondering why, as someone who works in economic development, we're interested in smart buildings. And it's because in addition to great things like helping the environment and saving businesses money, we're seeing this as an emerging economic driver. The Puget Sound region is developing an expertise in this technology. And to prove it, we recently came across a study that was commissioned by the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council, and that was released yesterday, actually, to the public. And they found some economic benefits include an additional $216 million brought to our regional economy and the creation of an additional 3,800 jobs. So we're very interested in it from that perspective. We also, as Josh mentioned, were the coordinators of the recent I-6 Green Challenge grant, which wrapped up in May. And that work specifically focused in the city of Seattle with the high performance building pilot, South Seattle College, the Smart Building Center. And when that grant wrapped up, I really pushed to say that we need to bring this work outside of the city of Seattle, that we need to take this information and talk to our other regional partners and see how we can help other cities and counties in the area adopt these tools, start seeing this energy savings, and bring some of that money to their area. So that's our interest in this topic. And I'm going to go through, you'll have to bear with me, I'm just going to do a few thanks here while I have the mic. First off to Stephanie at City of Seattle, thank you so much for pulling this workshop together with me. Clap for Stephanie. I also have to thank Josh Brown, our executive director, Patrick Pierce, my program manager, Sarah Lee, who was the manager of the I-6 grant, all for supporting me and putting this workshop together and saying that's a great idea and really being committed to spreading this knowledge throughout the whole region. Thank you for that. And of course, thank you to our presenters who have shared their time to be here with us today. I'll run through it real quick. We have Stephanie, of course. We have Brian Surratt with City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development, Matthew Combs, Seattle 2030 District, Lisa Perry at King County Metro, Perry England with McDonald Miller and also working on the King County project, and Mike Little and Lori Moen with Seattle City Light. Thank you both. Rodney Schaff with Sheraton, and Mike Robertson with UW, who will be joining us a little later on. And lastly, I have to thank Linda Lockwood for being here. She is an alumna of the Seattle High Performance Building Pilot and was there at the beginning helping get this program off the ground. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I have a few housekeeping notes before we get going. The first of which is you may have noticed in the back of the room, we have some resources on financing. Something that we are really committed to is getting you all in the room, not just to give you this information, but also to support you in figuring out how to actually make it happen. So, and of course that means funding. So there's a matrix of some funding opportunities that are applicable for various parties, and there's eligibility information included. So if you want to grab a copy of that. There's also, I put out a couple copies of the Smart City Council, which is based here in Redmond, Washington, put together a fabulous but very long financing guide for these kind of projects. It's about 200 pages. So at the end of the workshop, I'll be sending a follow-up email and all of those resources will be included. But if you're curious, you can take a flip through at the break and see what their financing guide looks like. And also presentations, a copy of the workshop will be sent out to you as well. So if there's anyone who couldn't be here today and you thought, gosh, they should really have this information, you'll be able to pass it along. Also, while we are going to be on a tight time schedule, so I will be cutting people off when presenting, and I'm going to try and keep sacred our 10 minutes at the end of each section for questions and answers. So in return, we ask that you hold questions until that designated Q&A time so we can make sure and get through the presentations. Lastly, we have bathrooms are down the hall and to the right. And because we are recording this, we ask that you be, make your best attempt to talk clearly into the microphone so we can get a nice crisp audio. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Stephanie.
Thanks, Sasha. Oops, this is the wrong one here. Let me open up PowerPoint here. All right, I'm gonna pass this off to Brian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Surratt. I am the director of the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development. I am, I think, 6 weeks into my gig, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Prior to my appointment, I was Mayor Ed Murray's senior policy advisor on economic development and utility policy for the city. And prior to that, I was the deputy director of the office and was at the beginning of this project. And it's on a personal level, it's really great to see this project come into this final form. There's so many partners, and Sasha, I really appreciate you acknowledging all the people that were a part of this from 2030. Obviously, our private sector partners who were our guinea pigs with this pilot, Sheraton and UW and others. But also, I really want to acknowledge Linda from Seattle City Light, because frankly, without the cooperation and partnership with the utility, none of this would have happened. And so this is, in many ways, economic development in its purest form, where you're bringing partners from across sectors, from across sectors, with an idea and the willingness to try on new things. And before I hand it over to Stephanie, who will go through kind of the details of the pilot, I want to provide just a little bit of background. Some of you know the background and kind of why, and Sasha touched on this a little bit about the project, but I want to kind of give you a brief overview of our office and kind of where our priorities are going to go. We invest in really three major lines of business, and for you hardcore economic development folks, especially at the city level, these hopefully make sense to you. You know, we invest in our entrepreneurs. We have a responsibility for every business that walks through the door, from a mom and pop Vietnamese restaurant to Russell Investments. We have to provide city services that provide value to businesses across the entire spectrum. And that's our commitment to our small businesses and large businesses in Seattle. But we also want to be strategic in our key industry sectors. And the Puget Sound Regional Council has helped this entire region really set that benchmark and those goals around, okay, what are our key clusters and where should we be investing our resources on lining all of our partners. And those industry sectors, you know, obviously are manufacturing and maritime and biotech and life science and healthcare and IT. And so we're going to be partnering with local leaders, but also wanting to make sure we align with the region in driving home strategic programming and policy work on that front. And then lastly, every region in the country is fighting for talent, talent development. Those regions who are going to be most successful are the ones who are able to obviously recruit and attract new people coming in, but also making sure that our homegrown talent have the skills to access these jobs. And when we talk about the widening income inequality gap, that is, there's almost, in addition to an economic imperative, there's almost a moral imperative that we make sure that folks in our own communities have access to these jobs that are growing in our region. So just want to give a sense of kind of our broad strategic vision at the City of Seattle and how we want to align with our regional partners. Just really quickly, this pilot has its origins through a partnership that we have with the Brookings Institute. I want to say back in, 2007, 2008, something like that. The folks out of Brookings really challenged our region and said, you need to develop a business plan on on a promising emerging industry sector. And working with PSRC, the chamber, and a number of industry leaders, we recognized that we really didn't have a good handle on what we wanted to, how we describe clean technology and what our region's strengths were in that. What we realized through this process was there was two really important assets that we had in our community that we probably needed to leverage better. One, and Josh touched on this a bit, we've got remarkably low energy rates, and that our forefathers who invested in our dams and Cooley, that provided the infrastructure for us to really accelerate our growth. So we had low energy costs. We also had a deep bench of green buildings and architects and engineers who have deep knowledge in this space. And obviously we have Microsoft and other leading IT companies. And so there had to be a convergence of those three some way, somehow. And what came of it was this pilot where we had across the water from Seattle, Microsoft exploring this space around, can we take data that buildings are generating? Again, not necessarily new buildings, but buildings across the space. Our downtown urban centers, they are producing data. And can we take that data and analyze it and drive efficiency at not only the building level, but at a city scale? That's the ultimate ambition. And how we constructed this, and Stephanie will go into more detail, but how we constructed this, we wanted to have a really diverse portfolio of buildings from manufacturing, office, medical research, and really test this theory that we can drive efficiency through data analytics in multiple and different environments. And if we were to prove successful in these micro environments, could there be a possibility of scaling this? And then obviously there's a great export opportunity here, because frankly, in a low cost environment like Seattle, if we can prove savings here, there are markets outside of Seattle that obviously have higher costs in providing energy, that this could be a great export possibly for our leading companies here. So that was our theory of change. And I think overall we've been very happy and pleased with the results of the pilot. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie to kind of walk through the details, and I look forward to Q&A after. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Brian. Good morning. So I'm going to kick things off with a brief video that was done with the collaboration of Innovate Washington and PSRC. Oops, let's see if, let me exit out of, just open it the old-fashioned way here.
In the U.S., commercial buildings alone waste as much as $50 billion per year in energy costs. Plugging an energy drain this big will take a revolution in building energy use. The City of Seattle High Performance Building Pilot is creating real-time energy savings using smart building tools that automatically detect anomalies in energy consumption. The pilot teams up the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development, Seattle 2030 District, Seattle City Light, Microsoft, and Accenture, which have set out to prove it's easier than people think to improve energy efficiency and save money.
The Seattle 2030 District helps connect members to a lot of building and energy tools and incentives that they don't necessarily know about.
Working to grow the Seattle 2030 District and increase market awareness of new technologies to improve energy efficiency, the High Performance Building Pilot installs sensors throughout the buildings. Dashboards then show which equipment fixes will save the most money. The pilot buildings are so far saving 5 to 15% of their total energy bills. The University of Washington has 2 buildings in the pilot.
Before we implemented the pilot project, we performed maintenance on the systems, but we didn't have a lot of detailed analytics as to what was really happening and the best time to make changes. This program has given us more real-time information as to how the building is running and how to save energy dollars.
Across town, the Sheraton is using this information to prevent problems before they happen.
Looking at the analytics tools, we can do predictive maintenance versus waiting for that guest to call and complain that the room is too warm and then finding out the fan terminal unit has failed and there's nothing we can really do for them. Now we can look at that and get that data ahead of time. And so not only are we saving money and energy, but we're creating return business because people know when they come here they're going to be comfortable in their environment.
At Boeing, information from this pilot will be shared to make other buildings more efficient.
Boeing's committed to building fuel-efficient aircraft, and so we're trying to make sure our buildings are also energy efficient. So we're trying to leverage the smart building technology here in Seattle to understand the potential for our facilities across the country.
These technologies often create very good energy, very positive return on investment. That can happen here in Seattle, where we have one of the lowest energy costs in the country, then it could potentially produce great financial savings in any building.
Right, and so that's just kind of to wake us all up and give you kind of some visual of yeah, things. Before
Our
we
buildings were all
watch an hour of YouTube videos, I'll just go back to the PowerPoint here. Sorry, this is a very touchy mouse. Okay, so as the video mentions, the High Performance Building is a collaborative effort to integrate major building systems onto a common network that shares information and functionality between their systems in order to improve energy efficiency, operational effectiveness, and tenant satisfaction. And so today I'm going to briefly go over the objectives of the High Performance Building pilot, give you a snapshot of the tool that we used, the team that brought this all together, the delivery, and some lessons that we have learned so far. So just reiterating that we do live in a climate of affordable, very low energy. Not only compared nationally, Seattle has really low electricity rates, but also in neighboring utilities. You can see down here in the table here that City Light's average rates are pretty reasonable here. So this is a blessing and a curse, and challenged us to think about if we can create a payback for building analytics here in the Northwest here, where energy rates are already low. Imagine the savings implemented in a high cost environment. So the objectives of the pilot was to accelerate the adoption of continuous commissioning through 5 areas that we wanted to focus on. So again, we wanted to show the return of investment for the key partners involved in the pilot. We wanted to show scalability and flexibility to increase market awareness. We wanted to improve equipment operations and reliability, and also align with Seattle 2030 energy and carbon reduction goals. And eventually we wanted to link conservation incentives to new technologies that improved energy performance. So the tool that was used was the Accenture Smart Building Solutions Continuous Commissioning. This basically pulls data from a number of building systems and provides energy management services such as continuous energy data analytics and fault detection and diagnosis. I cannot say that word. So this is a great solution because it's capital light. So that means that instead of expensive retrofits, continuing commissioning optimizes existing equipment to run more efficiently. It's non-disruptive, so there's no equipment to replace. Items don't have to be taken offline, so tenants don't feel the impact of that effort. And there's a quicker payback, so continuing commissioning produces savings much faster, leading to a quicker return on investment. Thank you. So this is a snapshot of Accenture's automated fault detection, diagnostics, and impact. So this allows facility personnel to target and manage equipment faults that cause energy waste. The faults include unbalanced airflow, broken dampeners, control component failures, valve leakage, dirty coils, a number of things. And upon detecting a fault, notifications appear on their dashboard similar to this, which itemizes those faults based on its location, equipment type, and time and occurrence, and also cost and impact. So engineers are able to use this dashboard to approach each scenario. So the team that drove this pilot was formed in 2012 through an RFP process that was funded through the I6 Green Challenge grant. The smart building teams was Accenture, that won the RFP was Accenture, Microsoft, and Seattle 2030, which was a really great private-public partnership in which Matthew's going to talk a little bit more about Seattle 2030 District here in a bit. The team roles include OED as the fiscal agent contracting directly with Seattle 2030 to support incentive funds for onboarding, participation, of the buildings that are in the pilot. And then Seattle 2030 District managed the contracts with Accenture, Microsoft, and any subcontractors involved in each of those pilot buildings. And then Accenture really drove the business cases, created the scope of work, integrated the solution package for each of the participating buildings. And City Light played a great role as our utility partner to support relationships with key accounts and act as a liaison for customer service, and also work in the conservation side of things, which you'll hear a little bit about from them briefly or in a bit on developing potential whole building analytic incentives in the future. So reflecting on one of our goals that I mentioned earlier, we wanted to really show the scalability and flexibility of smart building analytics. And so we approached looking at a variety of building types and sizes. And so the five buildings that participated in the pilot, as Brian mentioned, varied from hospitality to medical research, light industrial. We have a new construction, which is also medical research, and as well as an office building. So we wanted to see how these technologies cut across and connect diverse building systems, equipment manufacturers, and building types. So I'm going to go over these buildings, a snapshot briefly, but first I'm going to share just a brief our delivery approach. And so the team spent a lot of time courting buildings to participate in the pilot. So this is just a slide showing you the two stages of courting. So we, City Light, used their key accounts, their key account customers, which is about 150 of their top customers by revenue, and also collaborating with 2030 District to know the members in their area to court potential buildings that would be interested in participating in the pilot. Once they were interested in participating, then Accenture worked with them to gather building data, do a walkthrough, and then present a business case to them. If everything was moving smoothly from that process, then a scope of work was created, and also, the contract was initiated. And so that was the kind of what I'm kind of calling the courting process. And once that process went through, then we this is just an example of how we provided the service delivery. And these varied by building, so this is just an example of what it would look like. But basically the first phase was creating an assessment of details site survey, doing a utility bill analysis, and developing an energy performance baseline. Then the next phase was preparing, establishing, and validating that data. And then the third stage was analyzing the building data and providing recommendations. And this building go or no-go just gives you an example of where participating buildings or interested building owners could execute or decide to not participate in the pilot through the program. So this is just an example of what a business case looked like for interested building. Accenture put these together, and it's pretty cut and dry, but it did provide a 5-year visual of saving potential. They really focused on the return on investment, and this is just an example of what those business cases look like. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the participating buildings, and just a reminder that the pilot's goal was to show scalability and flexibility, and seeking a variety of the building types. And collectively, the 5 buildings covered more than 2 million square feet. So the Sheraton, which you'll hear a little bit more from Rodney, has participated since November of 2013, and they have nearly 400,000 square feet. That's not including the guest rooms. And their projected net year energy savings is a little under $600,000, and they've had a great ROI and some good savings, which Rodney may go into a little bit later. UW Brotman building has been participating also since November of 2013 and have a little over 200,000 square feet and have 136,000 projected net year energy savings. They've been saving nearly $85,000 through participating in the pilot and have a return on investment of 29 months at their current saving rate. So just an example, they have 324 machines pulling 7,721 data points into Microsoft's cloud. So just to give you a visual of the amount of data that this tool is collecting to get to some of these energy savings. So Boeing also started in November of 2013 and cover 315,000 square feet. There are manufacturing space example. They have a fairly great return on investment and a similar projected 5-year energy savings as Sheridan. And recent measurement and verification reports are really looking good. And Building E is our most recent building pilot over at the UW. This is a new constructed facility that I believe was built in 2007. So it's nice to have a building that's participating in the pilot where a lot of the equipment still is under warranty. So you can take a look at things a little deeper. They have over 200,000 square feet in the pilot and have a $183,000 projected net 5-year energy savings, and also have some very positive looking measurement and verification reports coming in. So Seattle Municipal Tower is our office space. It's our largest building in the pilot, covering over 1 million square feet. They participated for nearly a year, but found that they didn't have the infrastructure to really handle the data required to produce fault detections. And but they are actively exploring smart building technologies and retrofits in the other building portfolios that they have that don't require as much data points to understand how their other buildings are running. This is an example that they had over 1,000 machines pulling 35,000 data points into the cloud every 3 minutes. So just thinking of the IT infrastructure and in this project was pretty phenomenal. So just some high-level lessons learned so far. If you take some lessons that we've learned back to your city or county or agency for developing your own smart building project. Just the initial challenge of recruiting, even with incentive funds to help with the onboarding fees of moving this project forward, it was very difficult. So some suggestions would be to address the skepticism early, if that's a communication technique or just how you approach potential building owners that are interested in the pilot. Also, being agnostic in your tools that you're offering might be another suggestion too. Not every tool fits every building, which Matthew's going to get into a little bit here shortly. Another challenge that we had found was that communication and leadership really need to be at the table and early on through each of the buildings. And this depends on with like subcontractors need to be all engaged, IT departments need to be engaged. Getting that leadership and communication established early on really makes a big difference in kind of spearheading this and making the recommendations move forward after you have a contractor come in and make some suggestions. Also, just updating the business case as information is accessible helps tell your champion the story a little bit better to leadership to continue that leadership throughout the pilot. So that would be another recommendation. So we are on track to accomplish the pilot's objectives. And although the incentive funds are gone, our office has continued to build on the collaboration and success of this pilot. So, you know, we're on track with aligning our goals. We're seeing a really great return on investment for the key partners. We're still exploring the scalability and the flexibility of the building's participations in the pilot to really understand the market awareness. But and Matthew will also get into this of just the abundance of different tools out there that have come online since we initiated this pilot, which is also just an example of that there is a really great market out there for this. And City Light will talk a little bit about how we're eventually linking conservation incentives to new technologies such as smart building analytics. So I'm now going to pass the presentation off to Matthew here with Seattle 2030 District, and he's going to walk us through their leadership with smart building analytics and the high performance building pilot and other lines of businesses that they work on. And then we're going to take some questions afterwards. This over to you, Touchy. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So like Stephanie said, I'm Matthew Combe. I'm the Program and Operations Director at the Seattle 2030 District. Also the guy in the video. If anyone wants autographs, I'll be by the copy at the end. It's only $5 per autograph, so pretty reasonable, I think. So today, like Stephanie said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the district, who we are, the programs that we offer at the moment, and kind of walk you through our new strategic plan. And then I'm going to finish off going through our smart buildings program and those different levels of smart. And doing that process, hopefully I'll touch on how we fit into this high performance building project that the city had. Oh, I need to go back a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're a membership organization. We consist of real estate owners, managers, developers, and industry professionals, as well as community stakeholders, who all support the built environment in downtown Seattle and the surrounding neighborhoods. So really, the thing that I really want to emphasize here is that it's a private-public partnership. This organization was private sector led. And that's really important for us to, when we go out to members, that they feel that and they know it's not, no disrespect here, a city program. And it kind of allows, garners that trust between property owners and managers that we need to reach our goals. So the district goals, it's based on the 2030 Challenge for Planning, and it creates a high-performance urban area that dramatically reduces the environmental impacts of building construction and operations in Seattle. We currently have over 110 members, which is around about 230 buildings, which is about 45% of the square footage downtown. So we're a young organization, but we've grown very quickly. So this is the boundary of where we kind of reach and where our property owners are based. You can see it's a pretty large area of downtown. It's recently expanded, so kind of anyone who's within this border can participate in the district and gain access to the services that we have, which I'm going to go through now. So, like I said, the goals based on the Architecture 2030 Challenge for Planning, which if you're not familiar with, here they are. It's based on the 2003 CBEX database for energy, and the goal is to reduce your energy use, water, and transportation use by 50% by the year 2030. So by the end of this year, we're hoping to hit 10%, and then hitting those goals as we get to the year 2030. For new construction, it's a little bit different. Currently, we're asking for a 70% reduction in energy, and water and transportation stay the same at a 50% reduction. And as you go forward, water and transportation stay at 50%, but we're looking to hit carbon neutral by the year 2030. So what role do we play in this? I think really the district aims to break down the market barriers to developing and operating high performance buildings. And that's kind of why we got into the smart buildings process is really how do we break down that barrier. We provide a voice for the high performance real estate developers. We convene a lot of the stakeholders together so that they can share their ideas. We try and identify other opportunities in the building that aren't kind of obvious to the building owner that they might not necessarily know about. We try and broker strategic partnerships between owners, managers, the other community stakeholders, other nonprofits out there that are also doing great work. And then lastly, we try and advocate for public policies that will really accelerate the high performance buildings in Seattle. So like I said, our areas of focus, energy, water, and transportation. So really we're trying to increase Seattle's capacity for future growth and development by advancing energy efficiency in the built environment. So we've talked a lot about those low energy costs and the fact that we get our energy from hydropower. That obviously is a limited resource. We have a limited capacity on that, so we can't just go ahead and start using electricity like there's no tomorrow. We really have to try and create those efficient buildings so that that limited energy source will kind of last our growth throughout Seattle. And I think we've been successful in doing that. Currently, we have a huge growth in Seattle, and we're still managing to keep our energy use kind of static of what it's been over the last 5 years. Water, we aim to conserve Seattle's potable water resources and protect the Puget Sound through effective management of polluted runoff. I'll get into that a little bit later. And then we aim to promote affordable and low carbon transportation options. So I'm going to breeze over this pretty quickly, but energy, we measure that in kBTUs. We get that information through Portfolio Manager. Water is measured in gallons, and then transportation is measured in the metric tons of carbon emissions. So how are we doing at the moment? Currently, we have 230 buildings. Sorry, this slide is a little bit out of date, which is 51.8 million square foot. So for energy as an aggregate, throughout the district, we've been able to reduce our energy use by 9.13%. Water, it's not so great. There's a story behind the 2% reduction. For energy, as you all know, you're required to disclose your energy data to the city throughout the disclosure ordinance. Water is not one of those things. So a lot of our members have to do that manually, and it's been a struggle for us to try and get that information into Portfolio Manager. The members that are sharing their water data are currently at a 15% reduction. So we're hopeful that the other members, once they get their data in, will kind of mimic that and will be up close to that 10% mark. For transportation emissions, we've been able to reduce by 8.7%. A lot of the credit goes to Commute Seattle and the work that they've done to get people out of single occupancy vehicles and riding the bus, biking to work and walking, and kind of going through those options in a building of how they get to that point. So how do we do all this? So we have a few things that we try and do with all of our members. One of them is our performance reviews. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. It's kind of your basic level of smart buildings. We garner a lot of strategic partners, like I said before. We try and gather our members in roundtables, particularly our property owners and managers. We try and get them in kind of a safe space for them to share ideas and share resources on how they've hit efficiency goals within their building. The reason I say safe space, a lot of owners and managers, when they come to these things, they have a lot of people that are trying to sell them products. So if those are in the room, then people aren't as forthcoming with those ideas. So if you put them in a room together, no holds barred, a lot of that idea sharing happens more often. We have quarterly community meetings, which is where we kind of go through specific programs and we share with members where we are with the district. We do technology showcases such as the Smart Buildings program and highlight those programs. We have our annual report, and then lastly, our Vision Awards, which is coming up on November 10th, where we like to try and reward members for the good work that they've done. So we have two strategies for doing this work. One is to transform the buildings in Seattle, and the other one is to transform the market. And I'm going to kind of go through a lot of those things now. So the Smart Buildings Initiative, I'm going to touch on this, and then I'll finish with it at the end, given that we're in a Smart Buildings presentation. I figured it's best to end with that. So the aim of this really is to deploy innovative smart building technologies within Seattle and use the wealth of information technology and that we have here in Seattle with companies like Microsoft and Amazon. So the Smart Buildings Initiative is really aimed at deploying these advanced software to run smarter and more efficient buildings. Next, we have our Small Buildings Initiative, which is aimed at buildings under 50,000 square foot. We have a grant from the Department of Energy, which has allowed us to hire John Watson, who's our Small Commercial Programs Manager. And that really is aimed at creating tools for those building owners that don't necessarily have the time to look at these things. It's a kind of a very underserved market throughout the US. And what the Department of Energy was interested in doing is seeing if you can provide simple, basic tools that will allow them to reduce their energy use over a few years. So it looks at basic things of lighting upgrades, HVAC, just simple tools that they can use for efficiency upgrades. Next, we have our Green Stormwater Initiative. I touched on this a little bit. So stormwater in Seattle is a huge issue that really not many people know about or pay much attention to, and we really wanted to try and bring that to the forefront of people's attention. So we're promoting the use of rooftop gardens, on-site vegetation, bioswales, rainwater collection to try and reduce stormwater in Seattle by roughly around 170 million gallons annually. Some of you might be familiar with the city's goal of this. They are aiming to manage 700 million gallons of stormwater by the year 2025. Currently, they have no idea how they're going to hit 400 million gallons of that. So what we want to try and do as a district and the members want to try and achieve is to help them achieve that goal. Next, we have our Water Efficiency Initiative. This is pretty simple, basic stuff of showing people that there are other products out there that can reduce their potable water use, better toilets, low flow fixtures, simple things like that. It's amazing that the simple things often are glossed over and people don't necessarily know that much about them. Next, we have our Electrify Seattle initiative. Electric cars obviously make a huge amount of sense. We've gone through this already. Low electricity rates, hydropower, it's a clean source of energy. So we're trying to get more people into electric cars and create an electrical vehicle charging infrastructure downtown Seattle to promote the use of that. And in doing that, we'll also reduce our transportation emissions. It also helps us with our stormwater goal because there's less oil and other fun stuff that comes off cars going into the Puget Sound. It also helps us with our energy goals. The more efficient your building is and the more you reduce your energy gives you more capacity to put those charging stations into your buildings. So it's one of those programs that hits all three of our targets. Lastly, we have our commuter amenities. This is, again, pretty simple. We work with Commute Seattle to promote the use of bike facilities, on-site storage, showers, changing rooms, really to try and create that bike-friendly district. So next we have our transforming our market strategy. So to succeed with the district goals, our members really are going to require a favorable business and regulatory environment. And that's really what we're trying to do here is by advocate for policies that support our members in meeting the goals. And we also want to try and enhance the building's resiliency and the economic viability of those buildings. So some of the things that we're doing for that, the district network has a group purchasing organization that is coming into effect by the end of the year. This is pretty kind of a buying power of the districts network. So there's 10 districts now across the US and Canada, which is around about 300 million square foot of buildings. And we're really aiming to leverage that buying power to produce cheaper, to allow our members access to cheaper products like LED lights or electrochromic glass, things that are trying to break into the market and allow our members easier access to those things. Next, we have our green leases. We plan on using the DOE implementation models and the green lease library, as well as the advanced retrofit guides to help overcome the financial barriers between the landlords and the tenants, such as the split incentive. And hopefully this program will be up and running by the end of the year and accessible to members. Lastly, we have our private sector financing. This, again, it's one of those things that we just want to try and allow our members easier access to money to give them the opportunity to install energy efficient or water efficient products in their buildings. So I touched on the public policy and advocacy already, so I'm just going to skip over that one. So the Smart Buildings Initiative, I'll go into a little bit more detail on this, kind of the different levels of smart that are available to members and to everyone really at the moment. So currently, this is no longer a market of smart buildings or dumb buildings or of big data or of no data. There's a lot of subtle levels that exist in the market right now, different levels of data, controls, expense that are appropriate for different building types and different sizes. The high performance building project using Accenture solution is one of the most comprehensive, but I'm going to go through some of the simpler options that will eventually could get you up to that level. So I like to think of this as a basic schooling system. So on the first one is kind of your nursery school. And then you go up to elementary, high school, and then eventually to college. So first, we have your nursery school option. This is an option that is currently available to every building in Seattle through the Energy Disclosure Ordinance. So this is an example of how a high-performing building is higher in the winter, it's lower in the summer. So when it's cold and there's less daylight, obviously the energy use is higher because people have their lights on and they're heating. So this is to be expected. It means that the systems are not fighting one another, it's all working efficiently. This is an example of what an inefficient building looks like in Seattle. Obviously, it's pretty static, so it means that systems are working against each other. People are running hot and cooling at the same time. So in simple terms, you have your happy building, and then you have your sad building. So this really is not rocket science, but it's an easy way to introduce this to building owners that haven't necessarily looked at what's going on in their buildings, and then they can make changes accordingly. So if they wanted to make one of those changes, the next program up from this is called, this is an example of a program, but First View offers a program that taps into Portfolio Manager and just adds another layer onto that data. So it'll give you energy consumption by end use, a peer comparison to other buildings of a similar size, and your EUI by end use. So it will tell you that you're using a lot of energy in heating and your electrical baseload. So what do you need to do to try and reduce those things? It also goes into a little bit more detail on occupant load, can give you a bit of data on your envelope and if you really need to make significant changes in the building. Kind of a virtual audit of your building. So your next option is dashboards. And this ranges from just plugging into Portfolio Manager data, or you can look at CityLight offers smart meters, which will give you access to 15-minute interval data. And what dashboards do is just put that data into an easily digestible form. the kind of the heat map there on the left. The left is your, or the right, or turned around. Point in the morning, so it allows the engineer to go in and look at why that was.
Yeah, Dave Hill, City of Algona. How scalable is this? Obviously, if you have a 600,000 square foot building, you get a good return on investment. When do you get the return on investment if you have a 30,000 square foot building or a 60,000, 1/10 of the size? How long does it take to get a return on investment, or is this not available to those people? And what if your electric utility, have you been trying to do any cooperation with PSE on this sort of thing? Because the rest of the cities around this table are not Seattle City Light.
I'll speak to the PSE comment. We worked really collaboratively with Seattle City Light at this project and didn't really work with PSE on the natural gas piece. But that's a great opportunity. I know Bellevue, I know Emma, I know Bellevue and Puget Sound Energy are working on some smart building applications over there. I'm not sure, but you should check in with City of Bellevue on some of the work that they're doing.
I'll speak to, you raised a good point around the importance of working with the utility. The utility has to be a critical partner there. What was interesting with our relationship with City Light, on one hand, it was great and natural because they're part of the municipal government, and so we had easier access. At the same time, they provided a lot of healthy skepticism and challenged a lot of our assumptions about delivery of this program. So having them closely involved and pushing us and challenging us was really important. To your first question about scalability and return on investment on what's the appropriate size, that's a great question. And I really liked what Matthew laid out in that one graph around, as this market matures, there has to be a development of that suite of solutions that meet needs on the ground. And the pilot that we rolled out, was the Cadillac version. It was looking at larger buildings with ultimately the goal of city scale. But I think as the market matures, there are solutions out there that will speak to that smaller building because ultimately that return on investment has to make sense for the building owner and operator.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on it. I think those are all good points. If you are a smaller building, it is looking at those other options that don't necessarily look at the millions of data points that you need and maybe just the hundreds or the thousands of data points. I have a sneaky suspicion that Perry will probably dig into the scalability a little bit more. It's on the other side, Steve. Other side of the, yeah.
Here. Okay. I have a question. You talked about the difficulty or some of the challenges of getting folks to participate in the pilots. And I noticed that most of the participants are what I would call sort of institutions, the city government, University of Washington, Boeing, a hotel that's going to be here for a while, I imagine, and a large user of energy. Getting them to participate, I think, has been the same challenge we see generally in energy efficiency. So I just think that's something to kind of keep in mind, that return on investment is a good thing in a really hot real estate market. Getting building owners to invest is one of the challenges, and this becomes part of that, I think, general challenge around investments in efficiency.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. I think property owners and managers are kind of strange creatures when it comes to energy efficiency, for want of a better way of putting it. Everyone always wants to be the third to do something. It's very rare that you get people that want to be the first to pilot this kind of thing. So often you need the institutions, the larger companies who are willing to take that risk, or you have someone like Rodney who just gets it straight away and can go forward. And that's the idea of a pilot program, right? You go out, you prove the model. We have 4 buildings that are going through this now. They're seeing savings. You can show the return on investment. Now's the time that we have to go out to all those other people that we've met with once and that they said, oh, this is great, but we don't necessarily want to do it right now. Now we can go and sit down with them and say, well, you didn't want to do this then. We have 4 buildings now. These are the savings. Let's do this.
And the other point, and Stephanie mentioned this in her presentation, was now again as the market continues to mature, there's a lot more options there. Our pilot project, we had a solution in mind, and the incentive was we had these grant dollars from the I-6 grant that helped mitigate some of the risk there for folks and spreading and sharing some of that cost. But the concept, I think, has been implanted here. And again, as more folks come online, property owners are going to have a lot more options and a lot more flexibility to kind of meet them where they want to be. Again, do you want the Cadillac version similar to our program, or do you want, frankly, a business owner who just wants to have a better understanding of what their energy use is and may not find use at right now to make it actionable, but just having deeper understanding of your building is always a good thing.
Great. And we're going to leave it there for questions. We do have a break built in after this next section. So if you would like, you can, come up and speak with them at the break if you have more questions. I'll ask, Matthew, you can stay where you are, but Stephanie and Brian, I'll ask you to take these spots and we're going to switch out to our next 2 presenters.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? I'm Lisa Perriott, and I am with King County Metro Transit. I'm representing King County today, and I'm Transit's program manager for resource and energy conservation. And with me is?
I'm Perry England, Vice President, McDonald Miller Facility Solutions, board member, treasurer of Seattle 2030 District, as well as Northwest Energy Efficiency Council and Seattle and Emerald City, Seattle, over there with Steve Gelb.
Thanks. And so we're here to talk to you guys today about the King County's pilot program for smart buildings as well. So I thought I'd kick off the meeting the presentation with a little interesting factoid. And if you see on the left-hand side, that's actually King County's boundaries back in 1852. It actually went all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and we even had a little bit of piece of Snohomish County and Jefferson County as well. On the right-hand side is what our boundaries are today, which have changed. And that's in part what we're here to talk to you guys about today. It's just the change that we're facing with climate and all the changes with our environment. So even though our area has shrunk, we still encompass a fairly large area, and we have a lot of facilities, 350 or more, and a lot of square feet that we manage. And those assets on those facilities have a very wide range of ages. And I think Perry put it today, that as we develop our facilities, we bolt on facilities to existing facilities. And they've been growing over time. And the systems that actually run our HVAC systems and whatnot are all disparate. They're different manufacturers, different age of systems, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. And the metering systems that we're rolling out as well do not necessarily talk to each other. And so we have to spend a lot of time and resources doing a lot of data management and resource management. And also we have a lot of processes given the amount of facility types that we have. And it's, to me, always interesting to kind of see just exactly what all King County encompasses, and it's a large array and a lot of processes. So it's not only just looking at HVAC systems, operating systems, but it's also a lot of different types of processing systems. So all of those systems together spent or cost the county's taxpayers $28 million last year, and that's after we've saved $3 million from our energy conservation efforts. So it's an easy target for our leadership to go after because it's a significant amount of money that if we were to save, we can redirect those assets into functions and services that we provide. And Dow's priorities during this next term are in part best run government and confronting climate change, which this project today really plays into those two. And I can't, a little tangent on the city of Seattle's presentation. They said that leadership is key in the success of this pilot program, and I would definitely mirror that same comment, because without the leadership, it's very difficult to overcome a lot of the barriers that prevent us from being successful. So we really have benefited from the leadership of Dow and seeing his vision in action every day. And this is just a quick example about how we really have to do a lot of data manipulation. It's very labor intensive because we do have some smart technology that we're using, but we still need to spend a lot of time doing number crunching because of all those disparate systems. So the question is, with the 3 million we've saved, how do you save the next 3 million? Because it's not easy. It gets more difficult as you dive down into your energy savings. And I think everybody in this room today probably has the same 4 action areas. You're basically looking at capital improvements, changes in behavior, and how can you optimize your system. And I would say that we also share the same problems or biggest challenges, is that there's always more things to do in a day than there are hours in the day to do that. And we don't anticipate that we're going to be able to staff up to meet all these challenges. So then how do you use your people smarter than how you are today? And so that's part of our challenge, is using that existing resource base much more efficiently. And how do you take people out of the number crunching effort and actually shift them into analytical mode? So, because that's where you're putting the brain power and that's where you're making your critical decisions. So you want to spend more time in that phase and not doing all this data manipulation. So how can you automate that? So there is kind of the backdrop of our Smart Building project, because the beauty of the Smart Building project is it bridges all 4 of the action areas that we just showed. And it's blind to the geography. So if you have all these systems and you've got all these buildings, it's all tied together by the internet. So it's blind to that geography. And as far as disparate systems, what I find is that so many of our systems have their own proprietary language. So just with some hardware that basically bridges those different languages, you can pull together all the information from all the different systems and focus your time on the analytics like we talked about. And the other beauty that I'm hoping Perry's going to talk a lot about is that it allows us to look remotely at a dashboard and see in one fell swoop how your whole system is looking. And this has been something that we've been trying for more than 5 years to give our building operating engineers, and we've not been successful because of those barriers I talked about earlier. But when you have somebody like the top leadership in King County saying, let's make this happen, and what are the barriers and how can we overcome those, things get done that other people have struggled with for many years. And so it's quite exciting to see. So the leadership really does make a difference. And when they have that vision and they're checking in with the programs, it's what makes the difference between success and failure. And we see that this can leverage the existing people and assets. It's like I said, it's like how can you leverage their time so that you're making critical decisions on the analytical information as opposed to windshield time in a car going to a facility to actually see the system on site. So the pilot program is in partnership with McDonald Miller, Iconics, and Microsoft. And I think Dow really said it well when he rolled this out to the media, and he said, these are people and companies in our own backyard developing this expertise, and what a great opportunity to partner with them and bring this to the Northwest and develop it using our own facilities. So we're excited about that. It was a non-traditional agreement that tied us all together, and Perry can chat more about that perhaps when he's talking about different procurement practices. And what our intent is that this is a pilot project, and we'll work with Perry to kind of customize it. And I can say myself personally, we also have some other programs with conservation going on, some with Seattle City Light. And we'd like to try to customize some of our dashboards so that we can tie together these programs. And also, we want to use these dashboards to tie together different areas within our systems that our trades work with, so that we're bringing the resource conservation managers' efforts with the metering, and we're bringing the building operating engineers' systems in, and we're also bringing the process equipment, which in our case is the millwrights, so that we all can be looking at the same information and working cohesively together across the different areas of interest and trades. And we think that way the collaborative effort is going to propel this forward. And we're quite excited about this opportunity. So we had 5 buildings that we selected, and they range in different types. 2 of them are transit bases. One of them is our education center at Brightwater. Another one is one of our solid waste transfer stations in Bow Lake. And then an office building downtown, the Chinook building. The 3 on the right are actually platinum LEED to certain components of those buildings. And Ryerson and East Base, we've got some old HVAC systems and we've got some newer HVAC systems. So we're really trying to see what the scalability is, which is a question that was asked earlier, on old systems and maybe ones with new systems and more controls, and then it allows us to justify projects going forward. And then I think Perry was going to talk a little bit more too about which utility companies we're working with. And
so I'll go back to the previous question to start this off in the transition. We spent a considerable amount of time really looking at the 6 million square feet, the types of special purpose uses of the properties within the county, and really honed in on these 5. And one of it was on the utility side. King County has a neighboring county, Snohomish, and Brightwater is part of Snohomish PUD. And so the Brightwater Center was intentionally selected in order to engage Snohomish PUD. We also were intentional about some of the transit bases in Bow Lake because it's PSE territory. And then we also had Seattle City Light territory with Chinook, and I believe East Base, right? Is part of SCL territory. So from an engagement of utilities, the regional utilities, those 3 specifically, that was intentional. And part of the pilot, each one of the utilities are engaged in this exercise and really trying to, I believe probably for the first time in my 18 years out here in the Northwest, really starting to collaborate around some consistency and programs, incentive-based programs on a consistent level. So that was maybe addressing part of that in more detail. Are utilities engaged? The answer is yes. The other piece was just the use. We wanted to be something representative of many of you in this room, a municipality, and these facilities should look very familiar to you. Most of you have fire stations, police halls, city halls, things of that nature, as well as service centers. And so each one of these facilities are fairly representative of the life of a municipality. So those are some of the things that we considered when looking at this. And the other one that is important is these facilities, all of these facilities actually have some level of building automation. So there's already some smarts inside this building. So they're not pneumatic thermostats sitting out there in these properties. So there is some level of intelligence, and it doesn't have to be the most current technology, because we're working with systems that are 10, 15 years of age, which in the IT world, that's old, right? You should have already gone through 3 generations of updates by the time the system gets 15 years of age. And unfortunately, that's the reality of building operations. If we really think about it as building owners, how often do you really want to fund a software upgrade of your building automation system? Usually that's the last thing that gets considered, unless something's broke and you're uncomfortable or you're affecting your business process. And so the reality is, even though we have significant opportunity in our built environments, they get neglected because no one wants to spend money on it. And so the other fact is that the labor side, what budgets usually get cut when you are capital constrained? It's the operating budget. It's the facilities budget. And the one thing you have to do is pay your utility bill. I don't think any of you in this room are probably negligent in that fact. But at the end of the day, properly staffing your facilities is always a challenge. And I think Lisa can definitely speak to some of the constraints that they have within the county. So those are some of the things that when we start leveraging your existing investments, building automation investments, and then you start looking at how I can get more utilization out of the FTE, out of the labor that I currently have, knowing that my county or city is actually probably growing in most cases than not. How do I use technology to keep me, to help sustain my enterprise without spending a lot of money on it? And that's really at the core. I think the labor piece is, from my perspective and experience, is probably the biggest opportunity for justifying the investment. The energy just comes along as a secondary benefit. It's going to happen. Oops, which button? Oh, there we go. A little delayed there. So Lisa touched a little bit on this. The mobility piece, which, she has a Surface 3 here, Surface Pro 3. This is the first time that King County has really been unshackled from their workstation, from their office, from their desk, which is usually located in sub basements of most of these properties. And so for now we're enabling the staff, the evaluators of this pilot, to be able to look at their building systems and to be able to respond and communicate with the staff on hand that's in the site, that's in the building, in a more effective and real-time manner. That has not been the case in years past. The diagnostics and analytics that was spoken about earlier in the Seattle program are consistent with what we're doing with the county, and then really the objective, the overall objective of creating smart buildings and getting maximum productivity out of the energy that we have to consume in order to sustain our businesses. That is at the goal. Maximum productivity of the energy consumed. And so how do we make it happen? I thought this was probably, I called this slide the science behind benefit. And it really is as technical as I intend to go here today, unless you challenge me. But really it starts at the sub level, just equipment. More today than ever before, there is a convergence. This convergence happened about 5 years ago in reality of building technologies or IT infrastructure converging with building automation infrastructure. That convergence happened 5 years ago, and we've been building on that for the last 5 years, invisible to most people in the marketplace. And so therein lies the reality and the opportunity to really start leveraging technology, and hence why you got Microsoft 100% behind this, because they see it as a growth opportunity for their business in years to come, as well as just good business for them as a corporate real estate owner. So at the bottom level, the equipment level, it's getting smarter, and we're not leveraging it. And that shame on us for not doing that. I was at a Realcomm conference a month ago, and the biggest person there at Realcomm was Intel, the smarts inside your HVAC equipment. And so like we do with our automobiles, guess what? That chiller, that air handler, that VAV box, that fan coil unit, there's a chip inside knowing exactly how that thing's operating 24 hours a day. And the secret is accessing that knowledge of that individual device down to that level. And that's what analytics and Iconics and what we're doing with Microsoft and King County are enable us to realize. And then you got your control platforms, as Lisa talked to. These were basically built-on systems or purchased through separate budgets, where you got lighting controls. That was the one capital procurement. You got automation control, HVAC control. You've got power generation, emergency power. You've got all these different systems that's sitting on this operating engineer's desk that all have different unique usernames and passwords, and no one has access to it but that one individual. And so being able to unlock that real time and bring it into a software platform that actually now starts talking about common language, whether you're in the executive suite or the building engineers office down in the sub-basement, regardless, there's a common language that this analytics tool allows for everyone in the enterprise to be able to understand how their building is consuming energy, precious resources. So at the end of the day, Rodney, I'm sure will speak on this, you can't manage what you can't see. And so so the benefit behind the science really is making the invisible visible. We have experienced in situations where we thought we were doing a pretty good job, and years worth of analytical validation at the utility meter, whole building validation, where we were overachieving our engineered estimates. And we put analytics on there, Iconics analytics on there, and in year one, we exceeded that by over 12%. So we're already doing pretty good. We're already saving the building owner 25%, and now we're saving them 32% because, voila, we made the invisible visible. And when systems were simultaneously heating and cooling, guess where that was happening most of the time? When everyone's asleep. And so we were able to identify that, make corrective action in the software programming, eliminate that, and shoot our targets our savings targets up another 12%. And we've been consistently doing that year over year for the past 5 years in this one property. So financial, this was part of Sasha's agenda here. I don't think anyone's touched significantly on this, but as a municipality, how do I buy this, right? I want the drug. How do I go get it? And so in all the installations that we have, and Microsoft's actually validated in their corporate headquarters worldwide now, the ROI is easily under 3 years. There's not a situation or a building, no matter how old the building automation system is, as long as there's some DOS-based system in that building, we've been able to access that data, that knowledge that lives within that database, and still achieve that 3-year payback on the ROI. And that payback is basically just on energy alone, okay? Well, I'm not factoring in the labor savings, the labor productivity increases that we naturally get, and to me is the primary reason to invest. The procurement models, these may be familiar with you. If not, I'll explain them briefly. But the ESCO is the Energy Savings and Contracting Model. It's a delivery model that the state of Washington has embraced for many years now. Many energy service providers like McDowell & Miller are qualified ESCO companies. So it basically is streamlined your selection process. If you choose to use this process, you can actually select the best qualified or the person you have the best relationship with, and there's guarantees and transparency in pricing and savings results and outcomes when you make that choice. So it streamlines and reduces your costs for procurement and getting this done. The other one is a pay-for-performance model. I know the city is in 2016 is going to roll this out in a more formal way. They're working on the program design details as we speak, and Mike Little might be able to speak to that, or Lori later today. But pay-for-performance really is more of an operating agreement. Most of you probably have operating leases for your copy machines and things of that nature. They're kind of what you would consider consumables, right? That's going to always be changing out. You don't want to deal with the maintenance issues, all that type of stuff. Pay for performance is in the context of my definition here is very similar to that, leasing that copy machine. No upfront cost, 3 to 5 year operating agreement, and the performance piece, you only pay for what savings are delivered. And so obviously there's an annual contract guarantee, contract amount, but if we as a contractor don't deliver something that exceeds what you've paid us in services, we will write you a check. And so it's budget neutral. It's basically for all of you that have fixed budgets for the next year to 2 years, it eliminates having to wait for the next capital planning budget cycle. And so that we can go ahead and start realizing the savings today, tomorrow, versus waiting another 12 months and all the lost opportunity costs. Opportunity savings. And then the capital planning process, usually a 12 to 24 month process, depending on your planning and where you hit in the cycle. But it's just a more traditional way of procuring, an asset. I'll spin through this. I don't know what time we have here. Lisa can contribute a little bit.
Barry, you're going to have until 10 till.
Okay. All right, so we'll, I just wanted to give a little bit of fresh examples. Washington Athletic Club is one of our oldest properties that have been running analytics as we're deploying with King County. And again, this is a property that after the first year without analytics, we were exceeding our engineered estimates. When we put analytics on there, we jumped it up another 12%, and we continue to do that year over year over year. So we're growing our savings percentage every year, just because we made the invisible visible. Colleges, I think Sasha or someone mentioned this earlier. We're in the early stages of deploying at Seattle College. We find great benefit in large campuses such as the colleges, and we've been doing energy improvements up there with Ameresco for several years now, and now we're going to lay a layer of analytics on there to be able to really take it to the next level of performance and validation and reporting, to basically turn this into part of their curriculum at the college, so that now the students are actively engaged and participating in the learning experience. And then Highline, Barry Haldorf down at Highline has been using the analytics as a premise-based installation for the past 2 years, and mostly looking at it from a reporting. We're doing it from a validation of our energy savings, and also compliance with the state, as well as with the governing bodies at the college. But again, it's a productivity tool, it's a training tool, and it's a visualization tool so that all parts of an organization are speaking a common language. As far as prepared materials, that was it. There's some screenshots that we have, just the examples that if Lisa wants to, we can go through together, but just for the sake of time, I'll pause and ask if there's questions right now, and then we can take the conversations wherever it needs to go.
Sure, if you think now's a good time.
I'll impromptu a response back to the first question of the day on scalability. There's my response there is twofold. On a larger campus, the software installation cost, there's 2 models out there. Let me start with this. There's two basic deployment models of software. One is what's called on-premise. You heard me use that word earlier, but on-premise is using your own IT infrastructure, your server farm for your municipality, and loading that software on that hardware. Okay, the software itself has an inherent first cost, and so it's a matter of the economics of do you want to own that software outright in day one, or do you want to just have more of a software subscription, which is option 2. Option 2 is more of a cloud-based solution. I know King County is using Microsoft Azure. Yeah, Azure as their cloud service provider. You've got Amazon out there. You've got Google. You've got a whole host of different cloud service providers. But the other option is deploying the software, the Iconics in this case software, on that server platform. And that's really where we have done it as a service provider, to be able to touch those small buildings. We've got buildings online that's 15,000 square feet. And we're still getting the same return on investments, because we're avoiding that first cost of the software, and we're spreading that cost around a portfolio of buildings that are our service customers, not just having to install that software on each individual site. So being able, as you go through your selection and your criteria setting process, being able to select a manufacturer of software, analytic software, that can be deployed whether on your servers or on a cloud, shared service servers, is critically important for the flexibility and scalability of your solution for your entity, for your business.
Oh, go ahead, Sasha.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. Emma Johnson with the City of Bellevue. For the Seattle Municipal Tower, was that a case of them trying to install the data points on their own server? And was that kind of the deal breaker, or could they have gone to the cloud to analyze that data? I don't know if Matthew or Stephanie could talk about that.
Stephanie's looking at me as if I should answer this question. I'm actually not sure if it was the actual server. I just, I know it got to a point where there was so much data coming into them, and they had no way of kind of pushing that data out. It was just really the simplest way is the infrastructure in the building just wasn't there without them installing more equipment in the building. And then that kind of made the business case didn't make sense for them to do, so it kind of all fell apart from that point on. At the point, I don't know if there was an option of doing it in the cloud base, and I think that's what the city is looking at now, is the other options that are out there that don't necessarily need that amount of data, but that they can still look at what's going on in their buildings and make those changes.
Great. And Perry, I just want to check in with you. Are you ready to continue with our Q&A, or do you have a little bit left to wrap up?
I think I think we're good. We have some slides in here to show typical screenshots, but I think that's probably more than what we need to consume this morning.
Okay, great. Then we'll transition to Sarah.
Sarah Lee, Puget Sound Regional Council. My question is going back to scale. We have little cities here. We have big cities, medium. What's practical in, I guess, square footage size or number of buildings?
It's the practicality goes down to, do you have a core building automation system, right? And so that's just something that's controlling temperature control in your space, that has a computer that's embedded someplace in the building operator's office typically. We've got simple, like I mentioned, 15,000 square foot office buildings that are seeing benefit from it, that didn't require any major equipment upgrades. We already had a small building control system in there that had a computer that was controlling it. And so as long as we can access that data, the cost of connecting to that database is pretty minimal. So it hasn't really, from a municipality scale, I've talked to Snoqualmie, right? So that's what I would consider a relatively small, compared to King County or City of Seattle or Bellevue. That's on a smaller side of city, and they have most all their city buildings have automation in there, right? Whether it be Madison, Johnson, or Siemens or someone, and so being able to access that data is relatively straightforward and not really the cost, not a limiter.
I can add to that too. It's like one of the things that this pilot program is going to help us figure out is that we've got the two different transit bases, and they have different types of HVAC systems. One is an older unit, and it's they're older units, and it's basically gas on, gas off, and it's full power on for the blowers or full power off. There's not much difference. And so we're going to be looking at, is there still opportunities to save though? Because the other base has variable frequency drive, so it changes how fast the fans run, and how often are you turning your VAV boxes off and on and stuff like that. So there's a lot more controls, it's more advanced. So we'll be able to do the comparison, are there going to be savings? And so maybe instead of a small company or a small city having 20 rooftop units, they might have 10, but it might be of similar ilk as what we've got compared to the other investment. So then it's going to allow the decision makers to decide, some of these assets aren't at the end of their useful life. They still might have 10 more years left before they should be replaced. But should we be looking at replacing them earlier because we can get the energy savings that we're trying to get? And what makes more sense? Do we want to save energy? Do we want to leverage our asset investments? And where's the balance point between that? And I think that this is going to help us really start getting a better feel for it, because there's going to be data behind it. It's not going to be just a guess. It's actually going to be real data.
Perry, I've got a question for you. This is Mike Little at Seattle City Light, and I hope in the theme that we're talking about, there's risk and uncertainty associated with these projects. With all new technology, as Matthew pointed out, no one wants to be the pioneer and has arrows in their back, so to say, from trying something new and having it fail. So how does your firm share the risk or help these entities sell a project to their city manager or budget related management in their entities?
It's a great question. I wish I had the magic answer to that, because I'd be a really wealthy man right now if I figured that one out. But no, it's a tough challenge, and I go back to Lisa's statement. You got to have executive management engagement, otherwise it's going to fail. I'm sorry to say, but that's just reality. And so you can have the most willing chief engineer like a Rodney, right? We sit there, we're having lunch, having coffees, and we're talking about all the things we wish we could do, right? If management would only listen. If I can only open up that CFO's door one day and he would listen to me, I'd be a much happier person than I am right now. And so getting to that financial manager for your municipality, getting to the city manager is critical, Mike. And I don't know any other way of saying that. We've taken projects that we've identified, been working on for over 3 years, the Community Power Works thing. We still have projects out there from Community Power Works that never were executed on because we can't get to the owner. And the buildings are wasting 30%, 40%, and in one case, 50% of spending more energy than it should. And so, and it's just, it's a perplexing challenge. I think the uncertainty of technology. We've been an early adopter as a service provider. We started this journey about 10 years ago with another platform. It was one built on someone else's server, and they all had the engineering tools, and we had no access to it. And the industry, such as Microsoft and Iconics and others, outpaced them, outstripped them, right? They became the tortoise in the race. And so we had to jump platforms because they were limiting our ability to service our customers. And so we understand that pain because we've had to go through it. What I've learned through that experience is making sure it's IT centric and it's something that's out of the box, software out of the box. So I think we all have come to trust Microsoft. It may not be the perfect thing out there initially in their first software upgrade, but they're going to fix it, right? They're not going to go out of business tomorrow. And so that is somewhat of an assurance, a warm blanket, if you will, that there's some certainty in the future of the software. And so having the tools to be able to have full custody over your future is critically important. If you are talking to a provider and they say, well, you don't have, just call me, I'll write that new rules for you, I write that programming for you, that's a red flag in my mind. If you have to go and call 1-800, I can help you for $180 an hour, that's a problem. That's not longevity, and there's a lot of risk associated with that kind of business model, especially in the software industry.
I can also add to that too. I think anytime you're going into a completely new area, you have to manage the expectations, and schedule is a huge part of that. So it's like you're going to face these barriers, and people have got to understand it's not going to happen as quickly as we'd like it to, but be patient and work through the problems. And the other thing that I've seen is more successful is when you don't bite off too much. You start with a small amount. So like in our case, we're focusing mostly on HVAC systems. We're not focusing on process systems. And we'll get through some of the barriers there so that when we do consider if we want to expand more, we've already gotten through in a smaller scale some of the tough issues. So as we expand it out, then it's easier and fewer obstacles, so you're not biting off too much.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Great question, Mike. And I'm hoping that Rodney and Mike Robertson will be able to speak to that as well in terms of how they convinced management at their buildings to take this on. I think we have time for one more question before we head into the break. All right. If we don't have any more questions, then we will head to break and you have the opportunity to chat one-on-one with our presenters. After the break, we'll be coming back and we'll be discussing our two other aspects of these kind of projects. One, working with public utilities. We'll have a presentation from Seattle City Light, and then working with building owners and staff. All right, thank you for joining us for the second half of our workshop. I wanted to start off this half with just a thought or two from our previous presentations. We heard from Seattle and King County about their smart building projects. And I think one of the most interesting takeaways of both of those projects is that we all know that local governments are always looking for ways to save money and that they're on a budget. And this is a really fantastic opportunity to start moving some of that money that's currently allotted for operations, and with those energy savings, being able to shift that over into programming and providing more and better services to their jurisdictions. So hopefully that, to me that's a very inspiring statement, and hopefully something that we can do here in our region. With that, we have Seattle City Light giving us an overview of what it was like to work on the high performance building pilot and offer some advice for working with other similar utilities.
Good morning. I'm Mike Little from Seattle City Light. I'm in our Conservation Resources Division. I'm the manager of our planning and evaluation group. And I'll lead this off, and then I'll turn it over to Lori Moan, who's our manager of our conservation field operations. So briefly today, we're going to introduce the topic. We're going to talk about the high performance building pilot. We're going to talk about some other pay for performance concepts and pilot programs that we have operating at the moment. And then Lori's going to go into the current and future offerings that we have. I hope that we get through this relatively efficiently and quickly, so that we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So just anchoring your understanding of Seattle City Light, I'm sure you know who we are. We're a municipal electric utility. We have a long-standing commitment to energy efficiency as our first resource. And so we've been engaged in this almost 40 years. We have the longest continuously running energy conservation program of any electric utility in the country. We have an annual conservation target of 122 million kilowatt hours, and that's enough power to serve 15,000 Seattle homes for a year, to give you some context. Our incentive budget this year is $25 million out of a $47 million budget in total. The high performance building pilot was the primary launch point was with Linda Lockwood, who was with the account executive office at Seattle City Light when this started a couple years ago. Their involvement was to recruit participants and to help access the billing data that supports the overall effort. The Conservation Resources Division helped to identify energy saving opportunities through our existing programs. We saw it as a learning opportunity for our staff and our management to see how these efforts operate. It is a pilot, so we see all pilots as a learning opportunity for us. And our division is responsible for evaluating the energy savings with this and other performance-based pilot programs that we're operating. Dave Rodenheiser is the staff person who's leading that effort, and he reports to me. He's down in California at the moment, so he would be doing this presentation, but he's actually at work down in California. The current pilots, I'll just go through some of our offerings at the moment. What I want to talk about initially is the concept of a performance-based incentive program. we see the energy savings at the meter, and it captures all the savings and interactions that are happening at the building. Bear with me, I'm going to flip to where I am on the presentation. The overall effort is we're going to pay for energy savings that are delivered, in contrast to maybe the traditional programs that we've operated for a number of years that pays an incentive up front based on estimated energy savings for a particular project. And once that project is paid and completed, we may never know if the savings have really occurred or not until we go to evaluate the program. Where a performance-based effort, we are assured of the savings because we're paying for the delivery of savings. This allows the customer, whether it's you or your building facilities people, to pursue a wide range of projects. I think that either Matthew, maybe it was Matthew earlier, or someone else mentioned, operations and maintenance related savings, capital related savings, behavior related savings, working with employees in the buildings to reduce overall consumption. So we aren't particularly interested in how the savings occurred. We're just interested in the result, and we'll pay incentives on that. And that reduces our overall risk of savings not coming to fruition. The incentives under performance-based efforts occur over time. It's not a lump sum payment that we have traditionally made. We have the flexibility to vary the incentive level and the term of the contract, and I'll get into some of that detail here in a moment. Again, re-emphasizing we're only paying for the savings that are delivered. I sort of teed up a question for Perry a few minutes ago about uncertainty and maybe risk. And from our side of the ledger, we are curious if these savings did come about due to energy conservation or efficiency measures being in place, or was it curtailment or fuel switching that might have occurred? These are the types of things that we need to consider when we're looking at energy savings. Was it a result of legislation? Was it mandated? Is an issue for us. Seattle Energy Code is very stringent nowadays, and if it was required by code, we typically don't pay for it. There's also federal standards, appliance standards, or lighting standards that may come into play. Again, we're not paying for those types of savings. We want to be cognizant of changes in occupancy or production at a particular facility, so we try to tease that out with the analytics that we have available to us. Someone mentioned earlier today, not all facilities have clean billing histories. It's possible that meter reads are estimated, and we don't have a good sense of what was happening in that building over time. Again, we want to identify the variables that impact consumption and try to ferret those out of what the savings might be. And things happen. You guys recognize that things happen in your facilities and buildings that the meter itself can't always pick up on. I'm going to talk about our pay for performance pilot program that we've got operating now. We have 3 buildings, the Lake Union Building, 1111 3rd Avenue, and 1 Union Square. We have 3 service providers that are working with those 3 buildings, ATS, McKinstry, and McDonald Miller, and I think Perry has left already. Okay. These are 3-year contracts. we led an RFP in early 2013. It was one of our first experiences with a bid situation, a contract that was bid into. We had 10 proposals that were brought to me, and we evaluated those and selected these 3 buildings, and we're paying between 8 cents and 22 cents a kilowatt hour, and that was based on the mix of measures that the proposals identified and what we negotiated with the building owners. I'm gonna jump to a notable building here in Seattle, the Bullitt Center. New construction, finding baseline buildings that are comparable to this building has been a challenge. It is definitely, if it's not the most energy efficient building in the world, it's in the top 10. It produces more energy than it uses. It's got a significant solar system on the roof of it. I don't know if you can see the overhang in this photo, but those are all solar panels. The entire roof is PV. It's 240 megawatts. With the help of Energy RM, which is a firm down in Portland, we've implemented what's called a MEETS structure, metered energy efficiency transaction structure. The MEETS Coalition has its own website. You can go there and see how these transactions work. What it boils down to is our incentives are going to the investor, not the tenant and not the building owner. So we estimate the entire utility bill for the building. The meter reads negative at the moment because they're producing way more power than they're using in the summer months. But we send them a bill that is our best guess at what the building would have used if they didn't have all these other actions going on in the building. And they pay us that bill, and we take a certain amount of that money and return it to the investor. This sort of gets around the split incentive that maybe some of you are familiar with in either commercial buildings or multifamily structures. The Delta meter is a trademark. That is the software that estimates the energy savings from this particular building. We are evaluating our various pilot efforts. We've hired the Cadmus group to do that work on our behalf. We're trying to get to scalability is a theme here today. We're trying to move some of these efforts from pilots of 1 or 2, 3 buildings to offering a much broader offering to the rest of the service territory. And so Cadmus is helping us do that. They're helping us to evaluate the energy savings of the pay for performance, the Bullitt Center, and the high performance building pilot programs. And they're providing us with program recommendations also. We hope that that work is done early in the fall and that we're prepared to update our programs here in early 2016. And I think that's it for my sort of introduction. Do you want me to handle this for you?
I can do it. Thank you.
Okay.
So hello, I'm Lori Moen. I manage a group called Field Operations at Seattle City Light. We deliver the business programs to our commercial, industrial, multifamily, and small business customers. And so Mike really teed this up talking about how we went from the concept of pay for performance and high building performance, working with the high building performance pilot, initiating a pay for performance pilot in existing buildings with our customers, and then with the Bullitt Center. Those 3 have been talked about in pretty good detail here, and I think have been the focus of a lot of discussion in a lot of the City of Seattle organizations. And I'm going to cover some of the other things that we're doing that aren't really in the limelight, but they're happening at the same time and will feed into the overall assessment of how do we as a utility deliver this type of program to the customer. So one of the things that we have been doing, and I think a lot of our customers are aware of it, we have a retro commissioning pilot. And like our peer, Puget Sound Energy, they've got a full-blown program. We've kind of taken their structure and modified it a little bit. We've got 5 customers that we worked with to do 10 projects, and none of these projects have completely gone through the cycle. We've got a scoping phase, the actual implementation phase, and then a bonus for performance over time. And this is kind of outlined here. We're finding that, retro commissioning is, of course, very effective. And I think tying into some of the other points that were made, it is very, very labor intensive. And to do a traditional retro commissioning of a building requires a lot of time and energy and capacity. And it can be very successful. And there's a lot of interest in it. So we're hoping to expand this and continue to offer a very traditional retro commissioning type of program, and to make it a little bit easier for the customer to participate, because there are a lot of moving parts. If you can see the way this is set up, we're identifying minimal cost measures, low cost measures, and capital measures. So all these different buckets. And the reason why we pay different amounts for these different efforts is because of the persistence. And this is one of the things that is key to how utilities deliver programs. And Mike mentioned in the the pay for performance process, we actually had customers bid in at a rate that they felt they needed to be reimbursed for their projects. If you put a chiller in, we expect the savings from a chiller to last 15 to 20 years. If you change some set points, we expect those set points to last maybe 1, maybe 3 years. And so the value of the energy savings to us is very different depending upon the persistency of that measure. And therein lies the whole crux to this. Is we all know that you can spend millions of dollars in technologies in our buildings, but over time you don't always achieve the potential. And it's an equation that relates to your maintenance and operations budget. It relates to being aware of the problems and addressing the problems. And so how do we balance this all out, and how do we identify what the value of those savings are to the utility over time? It's not an easy solution. And so in our standard retro commissioning, we're providing incentives that really reflect the length of the savings that we expect these activities to achieve. If you're in the City of Seattle, you're maybe aware that we have a new performance pathway for the energy code. And City of Seattle's energy codes have led the nation and the state for a long time. The targeted performance pathway allows a customer to essentially model the building and get a targeted EUI. And to demonstrate that they've met code, they can use actual energy performance data from the first 3 years of the building after it's been occupied to demonstrate that they've met the energy code. So we have 2 pilots with 2 buildings that are going through this permitting process. I think they're the only 2 buildings so far. The first was a multifamily building that is actually about complete at this point, but I believe it was the first building to be permitted under this targeted performance path code. And interestingly, it's on the historical register. So it's not only a multifamily major renovation, but it's also very architecturally sensitive. So a lot of considerations that needed to go into this project. Because it was multifamily, it was kind of a different approach, and we worked with Bonneville Power Administration to help with metering of individual tenant spaces so that each tenant space can have a dashboard and can understand their energy consumption. So the whole building performance is going to be the common areas plus the tenant spaces. So it will be a true whole building performance. And the way we approach this one was some upfront funding through BPA for support of the meterings. And then on a performance-based incentive, calculating the estimated energy savings, paying half of it once the building was complete, and then we're going to pay the other half or up to that amount based on how much energy they're actually realizing from the metered data. So that's kind of one approach. It's a little bit on the simple side, and I kind of like that. One savings projection, two payments. It's pretty straightforward. Now, on the flip side, we're also in the process of designing a pilot with another building that's going to choose this path, and it's a commercial building, Pacific Tower. Many of you might be familiar with that. This is it's a showcase building. It's on the historical register, and there are a lot of individual stakeholders involved in the project at this building because they want to make it a showcase. Can you get deep energy savings from an older building that's historically challenging? And so looking at this, again, we're going to try to approach it for pay for performance. And in this case, there is, again, a targeted EUI that's adopted by the code by DPD and approved by DPD. What we're going to do is offer this customer incentives for blocks of energy savings when they go below that targeted EUI. And the deeper they go, the higher the incentive. So starting with 24 cents per kilowatt hour and ending at 84 cents per kilowatt hour if they can go 20% below that code. In the code, the customer has 3 years to demonstrate savings, and they get to pick the year, the 12-month period that is their best EUI. So we're going to give them 3 years too to do that as well. And we haven't actually written the agreement, so there's going to have to be some M&V in there that will satisfy some of the utility needs in terms of documentation of the savings. But we're probably going to align with DPD and what they're looking for on a submittal. The other thing that we're looking at with this, which I think is really important, and if any of you have ever opened a new building and commissioned it, you'll know that the first year is always the worst year. And it usually takes 2 to 3 years, if not longer, to reach the optimum efficiency of that building when you have the maintenance and the occupants all on board and trained, and you've worked through all the bugs, and the systems are actually running the way you need them to run to meet the conditions of the building. There's the whole concept of persistency, which is really the fundamental of pay for performance. Is we want these projects to be successful, and then we want them to last. So in addition to this first targeted period, we're looking at a performance afterwards that would help us make sure that the persistence of savings exists. So another 3 years after the first 3 years with a persistency of 3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is our rate for really an operational sort of O&M type of measure. Another initiative that we have going on internal to City Light that may become a customer offering is using some of the virtual auditing tools. And unlike Puget Sound Energy, PSE has a whole fleet of interval meters. If you're in their service territory, it's 95% likely that you have an interval meter on the building. Only very few of their buildings don't have the interval data for both gas and electricity. But in the city of Seattle, we have our interval data primarily in the downtown network. So the buildings that are really the larger customers, where probably a lot of this opportunity exists, we have the 15-minute interval data available. And under a evaluation contract, we hired a service provider to actually do virtual audits of 300 buildings. And we're just now getting the data from this. It's quite insightful. It's similar to the dashboards that you've seen in some of the other presentations, where they're able to take the 15-minute interval data, break it down into use patterns, identify the end uses, and come up with some opportunities for savings, and then present those in a report. We're looking at it right now for demand management. We have, potentially some interest in reducing the demand on our downtown network. But ultimately, this could really be a great talking point tool, business development tool for us with our customers to to implement projects within our programs. So we're just starting to look at it. It's relatively cost effective, and we'll have to figure out, can this become a full-scale program, and can we provide some of this information to our customers? So the future, you've heard that we're committed to creating a pay-for-performance program at the City of Seattle and Seattle City Light. For a larger pool of commercial buildings. There's a lot of different building types out there. We've heard a lot about that. We think that for sure these will be agreements over time, hopefully longer term, possibly 5 years or more, so that we have a relationship over that time with the customer. And one of the things that's also very important to the City of Seattle is that we incorporate some elements of workforce development to make sure that we're being inclusive and looking at diversity in the way these projects are implemented and who's participating in that. And we see it as a real workforce growth opportunity because of the tie-in to building operators. And as we all know, it's the building operators who are going to take this data and make the savings real. Without them, the data analytics, you just don't acquire the savings. You have to have somebody going out to that piece of equipment and making the repairs. And then you also have to have your maintenance budget. We all know about that too. So these are some of the things that we know, but from a utility perspective, there's a lot of different considerations. And I know that I meet with my peers at Snohomish County PUD, Tacoma Power, and PSC quarterly. And we are working hard to try and align our strategies, align some of our program rules, and we all have very similar constraints and considerations. And when it comes to demand-side management programs with utilities, we have certain things that we need to ensure. And when we design these programs, we have to think about, is it sustainable to have customers bid into a certain project? I mean, we've spent hours and hours of staff time on these pilots. We have to be able to scale these so that we have a menu of services that meet the needs of the customers. So we have different types of customers. We have institutional, we have retail, we have portfolio customers, we have tenant owners and other relationships. And in all of those cases, we want to put together an offering that can meet one of those needs so that we can get as much participation as possible. On the incentive side, can we figure out an incentive level that spurs you to action, that calls you to action, that meets your financial needs? And that might be very different if you're doing an O&M or if you want to do a chiller. So we have to figure out what those sweet spots are. And then do we offer this to everybody or just particular buildings that look like they might be potential for savings? I think somebody said, well, what if we've got a really well operating building? And then Perry said, well, we had a really well operating building. We found out we weren't operating it as good as we could have been. So there's kind of a question there is what is the eligibility? And then of course, who performs it? Can your own staff perform the work, or does it have to be a third party? And we've seen that there's a lot of different products out there, all with different perspectives and different features. How do we as a utility be brand blind across those features? We have to identify what are the deliverables that we need. And then you as the customer can hopefully make a decision about what product you want to use and what service provider you want to use. And then bottom line is we're mandated to do conservation by the state and other authorities. And we have to meet certain evaluation criteria, including the state auditor. So we have to have enough documentation that'll withstand those audits. And what is that documentation? We want to make it as easy as possible for you. But because this is new, those folks that are out there doing the evaluations haven't seen a lot of this. And so they're kind of looking at this too, going, okay, well, what do we need in these files? How much do we need to validate it? And it's good that we have the we have the protocol for measurement and verification in place. And there are some standards that are becoming best practices out there, and we can look to those. And hopefully, some of these projects will stand on their own merit. And I think, as having been a representative of a building owner in the past, you know when your buildings are saving energy, and you don't feel like you need all the data to demonstrate that. But again, as a utility entrusted with millions of dollars of public funding, we have to make sure that we have the documentation. So in addition to that, and I'll wrap it up, I think we're out of time here, or close to that. There's a lot of other support things that we're looking at that we can provide as part of this program to help customers, education, awareness, tools, training, tips, networking, all of the best practices that you've heard, the 2030 district is offering. How does the utility support that? What is our role? A lot of questions that we still need to answer, but I think we've taken some major steps to start walking down that pathway. And I know that all the utilities in the region are thinking about this as well. So don't be concerned, it will filter outside of the city of Seattle. I know that the audience here is not predominantly the city of Seattle, but this is here to stay. This is the next generation. And I'll just finish by saying, technology is one tool, but it's the people. And we have to make sure we're linking the people who use the buildings with the information that we can gain from them, and leverage, as Lisa said, leverage the technology to analyze the data and do that work to remove those barriers for the people. So I think we're going to wrap up here for Seattle City Light. This is our contact information if you have any questions for us, and then we like to finish with our neon sign and mission, vision, and values. And that's not, is that LED yet?
No.
I don't think that's LED
No,
yet.
Thank you so much.
It's very efficient fluorescent technology.
Neon.
Neon, sorry.
Thank you, Mike and Lori. We have a couple of minutes for questions, and I'll just remind you, if you're not seated at the table, to come up to this reserved spot to use the microphone, and please let us know your name and your agency.
Good morning, Rodney Schaff, Sheraton Seattle Hotel. I was looking at your slides a few minutes ago, and I'm looking at your minimal cost investment at 6 cents a kWh, your medium cost investment at 9 cents a kWh, and your capital cost at 3 cents a kWh. I'm wondering, and maybe a little more explanation in what we can do in a few minutes here, what the logic behind that is, because many of our financial people are looking at this going, if we want an ROI on a capital investment, why are we giving that minimal consideration from a conservation funding resource?
Yeah, so thanks, Rodney. That particular slide I think you're referring to is on the retro commissioning program. And so as I was mentioning, the value that we place on purchasing the kilowatt hours is based on a couple of things. There's an avoided cost, and as we know, the cost of purchasing power in the city of Seattle is low, but also the expected life of the measure. And to be honest, we have not assessed these numbers in some time, and we're due to readdress that. But the 3 cents is what our avoided cost is for purchasing power that will last for 1 year. And so that's the price point. It's, offsetting generation for 1 year. But of course, when you buy a power plant, you don't expect power to last just 1 year. You're getting it for 30 to 50 years. So when we look for funding of capital projects, that number goes up. And across all of our programs, our funding level average is about 22 cents per kilowatt hour across all the different measures that we fund, I believe.
Typically paid in a lump sum.
Typically paid in a lump sum. This retro commissioning is 1 year savings at these levels. So this is still, the retro commissioning program right now is still very much a traditional program. Although it is performance-based, we're going to pay it based on verified savings. It's a one-time payment. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Emma Johnson, City of Bellevue. I have a question about if this type of structure requires that you have folks that can actually estimate and validate the savings before implementing it, because otherwise there's a risk to the owner. So are you requiring an ESCO or some sort of CEM like in the organization to provide and validate those savings prior to doing the project?
Good question. Let me confer with her for a second.
We've done that on the pilot phases. The question is that reasonable when you scale?
Right.
And with some of the virtual audits, there are projections of savings that can help us budget, because we have a need to know if we offer these programs up, how much is it going to cost and how much are we going to save? I mean, if we've got a budget and we can't go over it, but if we have unbounded agreements with customers, we could get into trouble pretty quickly. So we're going to need to have some sense of what that is.
And I think back to the points I was making earlier, we're interested in what the meter sees, and we aren't terribly concerned about how that happens. So whether you have an ESCO behind you, whether it's McKinstry or Mac Miller or some other entity that's maybe guaranteeing the savings, or it's your own staff, we might be indifferent to that as long as we can validate that the savings are coming from actions you've taken. I hope that helps.
I guess it just seems like it might be a potential barrier to organizations that don't have access to that kind of expertise.
So I would, I think that's a good follow-up. I think that's something that we should have brought to your attention. Lean on your service providers. Lean on your electric utilities or gas utilities to help you provide that technical support. We have professional engineers on our staff. I don't want to talk for Lori necessarily, but that's their job, or for Lucy, who still works for us, I guess. Their job is to go out and help customers identify opportunities and to bring those to fruition. So PSE, Snohomish, Tacoma, all have staff to do that work.
So I mentioned too that we are gathering information right now from buildings where we have interval data, and it could be that we utilize that as an estimate of potential when we enter into an agreement with a customer. We still have a long way to go to figure out the details of scaling this up. And, you know, I will say that I'm not necessarily 100% in agreement with Mike that we don't care how the savings are acquired. In the pay for performance pilot, we did consider what was going to be part of that proposal. Is it O&M? Is it people? Is it capital? And we all know that those three things make an efficient building. You can't have one without the other. So how do you design a program to meet that? We can get some projections with the virtual audits. In fact, I'll tell you that we just looked at some of the data for this Seattle Municipal Tower, which is part of the high performance building. And that said that you could save 30% from that building. 30% is a lot. I think that any good building operator can probably walk into a building and find 5%. And if you get the people engaged, you can maybe get another 5%, but 30% means there's probably some capital in there too. What's the price point for that? How long do we have an agreement? How long do we give the customer to achieve that? And then, you know, how do you know what to do? Those are all good questions that we have to figure out. And that's where the service providers come in, because they have those solutions, they have those answers. And they also have the financing opportunities to make it happen.
We have a couple of minutes if there's any other questions, or we can head into our next section. Okay, great. Thank you, Mike and Lori. And one of the parts of your presentation that I think is particularly fantastic is that these pilot programs are now being moved into full-fledged programs and being integrated with the normal offerings. It's really great to see. So thank you for the info. We're going to switch over in our presenters here and get going. Okay, for our last section of the workshop, we have the opportunity to speak with actual facility managers about participating in these types of programs and ask any questions we might have about attracting participants. We have Rodney Schaff with Sheraton Hotel, which was a participant in the Seattle High Performance Building pilot and is continuing to use the technology and seeing fantastic savings. And just in the nick of time, we have Mike Robertson with the University of Washington. University of Washington, also a participant in Seattle's pilot. Interesting story here is they brought one building online, had great success, loved the technology so much that they have a second building that they decided to install it in. So they have 2 up and running, and Mike can talk more about that. And one thing I'll point out about those buildings, one is an older building, and the second that they just brought online is newer construction. I believe it was built in the late 2000s, around 2007?
Yes, 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago. So again, proof that these technologies are applicable for older buildings and new construction. I'll leave it to you guys.
Good afternoon, Rodney Schaff, Sheraton Hotel Seattle. I was asked to come in today to talk about how to attract and approach and attract people into these programs. Sorry, I don't have a slide for that because I really didn't know how to set that up. But after watching Stephanie's presentation, I now know what to do. When we were first approached with this, I was at another property here in Seattle where the ownership was outside the Seattle area. It was the same management company, but a different ownership group. And they were very skeptical of it, that it was a new technology, it was unproven. There's so much of a hospitality property that's really not managed by the building automation system. We can't dictate that when a guest goes into their room, they set their thermostats at 68 degrees or 72, depending on the season. And so there's so much of our properties that are not managed. It was really difficult to bring into understanding of this first group, this first ownership group. As I said, their location was East Coast, and they weren't at the table. Subsequent to that, I had the opportunity to move to the Sheraton Hotel, where there is a local ownership organization and who's been actively involved in energy conservation and energy management in the Seattle area and the Pacific Northwest for a number of years. We still ran into the skepticism that was mentioned earlier in this because they had been so proactive. We have plaques in our building from Seattle City Light going back to 2002, 2003, recognizing us for our conservation measures. So how much more can we do by bringing in, these analytics? The demonstration took a lot of work as we pulled this together. We had our ownership at the group, we had our financial people at the group, we had our general manager at the group, and the presentation put forth was very technical. And as was alluded to earlier with Matthew and Perry, I've been in the business for a long time, so I was basically able to translate from the technical pieces into the language that the financial people and the other folks around the table could understand. So focused on when you're bringing people in or you're interested in bringing people into this, and you don't have somebody with 30, 40 years of experience to act as that translator, make sure what you're presenting is in terms that's easily understood or easily describable, and it shows up really well on a PowerPoint presentation, because that really helps in those folks being able to grasp what's happening. But even with that, as I said, our local ownership still had some skepticism because of our proactiveness in energy conservation. So in working with the 2030 district and Seattle City Light, we were able to sit down and take what had originally been proposed as a 5-year plan and break it out into smaller increments so that we could put savings targets and time targets to a document that gave us an out, lack of a better word, in the event that we didn't make those numbers. So keeping flexibility into the program that you're presenting, allowing people to step back and think about that, what happens if we don't make that number? Am I still locked into a 5-year deal? Or is there an opportunity that, we can sit down and renegotiate, or perhaps there's an out should we can't or not make our targets? They were able to present that to us. We sat down together, put everything in place. We had challenges with our building automation system, converting to the language that Accenture did. We were using in their cloud computing. We were able to work through that. We were able to work through some of the other questions around how this interface worked, how this alerts for faults would be notified, and being able to convince that early on and show that early on in the process to our owners, help them buy in, gave us that window of opportunity to reach the ROI and the savings numbers that you saw earlier that were presented here. A few minutes ago, I was asked about our guest rooms. And just to be clear, the 400,000 square feet that were presented in that slide is only our public areas. The property overall is 1.1 million square feet, but this is just the savings and management that we have in our public areas, because we're not actually controlling each individual guest room yet. We hope to grow this in a coming renovation and put those controls in the guest room. There was conversation around new buildings and what if we're already LEED, or what if we're already, high rating in the Energy Star program. And I can tell you that we have 2 towers, one opened in 1982, one opened in 2007. The one in 2007 is approximately 50% of our 1982 tower, but yet probably the majority of our savings has come from the new tower, not the old tower. Because as I said, we'd been proactive in this long before. And so we had absorbed a lot of those controls, the variable speed drives and all that were already in place in the older tower. So when we look at the numbers that are presented, a significant value, a lot of that came out of, again, our new tower. So that example alone is something that we can take, or you can take back to your people and say, so what, it's a brand new building. We have examples of those savings that we can demonstrate to you. We can show you that there's the capability and the necessity to bring these analytics in to the built environment. The earlier video that was shown, we talked about predictive maintenance as a savings. I can't tell you how much maintenance savings we've had because of a predictive standpoint. We can go in and we can trend this, and we can see where a unit, is one day it's operating at what we see as a peak or an ideal capacity, and you start to see it trend a different direction. So then you can go in and shut it down in the middle of the night. You can shut it down when a space is empty, and you can take care of this problem when it's not going to be a critical failure at a peak convention and cause client dissatisfaction and create comfort issues through your building. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the idea is, I can reference on, speaking the language of the people around the table, bringing some numbers in, making sure that you work closely with your building facility, your facilities managers. The data that you're bringing to the table is been vetted in some manner. Your utilities can help with that. Seattle City Light, we use those folks for pre and post monitoring to prove our savings. Just one side note to this, the first building that we proposed this at, over a 2008 baseline, they've had about a 1% savings. The Sheraton Seattle, this is from a third-party monitoring. The Sheraton Seattle, where we got into the smart building project, our savings over that 2008 baseline now is just over 29%. So there's always room to grow the scope of what you're doing in energy conservation.
Thanks, Rodney. Well, I appreciate you putting up with my tardiness, but I just returned from vacation, so my time is very compressed these days, so thank you. My name is Mike Robertson, and I manage facilities at the University of Washington off-site from the main campus. I manage things other than the main campus, so I'm concerned about off-campus properties, so that's what I look after. I'm based at South Lake Union, and when we were approached about this program with Seattle City Light and others, it was interesting to us because we always are looking, as others are, to do the right thing in terms of energy conservation and reducing our carbon footprint in the community. So when the proposal was given to us, we looked at it. We took a little time to look at it and evaluate it. And look at the numbers that was presented to us based on our square footage. And just to back up a little bit, our entire campus at this point is approximately 750,000 square feet of wet bench lab space. So it's a very controlled space. We do wet bench lab research there, and we have other specialized areas as well. And so because of the constraints, regulatory constraints of a laboratory, energy costs are high, mostly because we have to bring 100% air in, condition it, and blow it right back out. We can't recycle anything. And so our energy costs are very high. And so we look at anything we can do to reduce those costs. And this seemed like an initiative that bore some fruit for us. So when we looked at the initial contract that was presented to us based on the initial oldest building on our campus, which we brought online in 2003, if any of you are from Seattle, it's the old Blue Flame building of Washington Natural Gas building. That's the building it is. So we completely retrofitted that in 2003 and made it into a wet lab, and that was the first building on our complex there in South Lake Union. Subsequent to that, in 2007, we brought on another 3 buildings, and in 2013, we added another building across the street to come up with a total of the gross square footage that we have. So we first focused on the older building because we thought that would give us the best low-hanging fruit for and bang for our buck on energy conservation. And so we implemented the program about a year and a half ago, and looking at the contract, when we first looked at the analytics, what we would get, and the return on investment, we found that it looked very good. For a couple of years, we would have our money back. We did negotiate an exit ramp should the real savings not be realized, and so we would look and say, okay, if it isn't realized, if this is not panning out, how do we dissolve ourselves from this? So the folks that we worked with were very accommodating, understanding, and so we exited that to our satisfaction. It was an easy sell to us, to our administration, because the university is very conscious of our footprint in the community and our energy dollars, because we are a large organization, and so we're very conscious of that and how our perspective to the community. So it was an easy sell. We looked at the numbers, we took it to finance, we looked at our return on investment. They all agreed it was a good thing, and so we initiated the contract. Subsequent to that, when we got that contract in place and it was up and going, and worked out some of the bugs that any contract or any system like this will have, we began looking at our newest building, which we brought online in 2013. And the reason why we looked at that building as opposed to some of the other buildings is for the simple reason that it had the same control system that the original building had. So the migration from first building to this building would be fairly seamless. There were some idiosyncrasies with doing that, but however, it seemed like a good idea, and I think it has been. So we are in the process right now of implementing this building, getting it up and running. We've done a lot of work in the last couple of months with both the 2030 group and our on-site people to make sure that we're reading data correctly and we're getting the data points that we need. And so excuse me, the numbers that we've gotten back so far over the year, and I don't have them with me, I apologize, but we've got some real savings in our energy, both in electrical and natural gas. One of our big winners was actually surprisingly natural gas, because we have natural gas fired boilers. And so we were able to do some energy night setbacks on our boilers, which substantially reduced our consumption, which was something that we hadn't really considered. So it was a nice win for us. But looking forward, we're looking forward to getting this building up and running fully and online, and realizing some savings, and possibly looking at some of our other structures thereafter. So that's about where we're at.
Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing your experiences. We will move to questions, and this is your opportunity. You have them captive in the room for any questions you might have about working with building managers.
Sasha?
Yeah, you guys did just a good job.
This is Sarah Lee with Puget Sound Regional Council. Rodney, before Rodney got up there, I said, now, Rodney, you'll talk in a language I understand, right? And so you did, but you're talking about, one of the things Stephanie talked about at the very beginning was all the different groups you have to get on board in all the different order. So a lot of these people here in this room are, I think, we have people in planning, right? Public Works. Is that right? Am I right? Oh, and we have economic development. Thank you. But what kind of advice would you give us for talking in the language that gets everyone in the same room on the same page, because it's all different languages in the same room?
Good question. The best answer I can give you would be that somebody, somewhere along the way, you've got somebody that has, an opportunity that's done this for a little while and has had that opportunity to interact with all these different groups in some manner, whether it's the financial people or the owners that are more interested in the bottom line and maybe don't understand energy conservation to the level that we do or understand that. So it's having that, and lack of a better term, the interpreter to be able to answer those questions or be able to relate the data that's being presented to what other folks will understand. We all have our specialties, and I can talk about KWH and KBTUs and to the day's end, but that may not relate to the individual who's doing the finances across the table from me. So having an experienced individual who's interacted with the different groups and can reflect the data in 2 or 3 different measures is what's really going to sell this and be able to put this forward to be successful.
Sure, I have some comments there as well. I think those are very real issues. But in most organizations, planners and firms that put these things together, they want to do the right thing, I believe, in terms of energy use and our impact on the community. Because what this has done for us, and I know it can do for others, and it's very real on the bottom line, you're able to better optimize your building system, which cuts down on all kinds of costs and gives you better evaluation tools to help optimize your system. And what that translates into is reduced energy consumption, which again translates into reduced O&M costs over time. So these things are if these things are stressed as wins, they're wins for everybody, and it's a great sell. One of the things I would say, and that was our experience in dealing with this group in getting our contract together, and that is make sure that we're upfront with the expectations of the expected savings and costs. And we questioned that, and they come back to us, and it was very much to our satisfaction. But people understand dollars, and they want to know what it's really going to cost and what it's really going to save them. And so that helps when we're very upfront about that. And there's other things like don't undervaluate the what it's going to take from the in-house staff to support this system, because that's something that's a commitment also, and factor that into your equation. We did that, and it turned out very well. All of our upfront costs, including labor by in-house staff to support this, was right there. We knew what it was going to be, or at least project it was going to be, and it came out where we thought it would be, and that was all a good thing. And again, also make sure your established baselines, when you establish baselines for payback, are realistic and everybody agrees upon them. We did that as well, and there were no surprises in the outcome. So those are things that we learned.
A question about that. Are you just using simple payback, or are you using more sophisticated financial indicators like internal rate of return and net present value?
We're looking at a host of it from a host of different ways. We get analytics from the 2030 group at our monthly meetings that give us the numbers based on the baseline that was established in the beginning. And so we look at that. And that's on total square footage. We look at the return there and our savings over per discipline based on the time period we're talking about. And then we factor that into our own analytics of return on investment over time. So it's a combination. We just look at it from several different ways. That makes sense. Yeah.
And I'll echo that. One of our leading pieces that they look at is the internal rate of return. And so, the initial is ROI, just simple payback. And then as we boil this down and as we gather the data and analyze it, that draws out to both a net present value and an internal rate of return. That's all considered in the entire package.
I have a question of my own, and that is, do you have any plans for the savings that you're starting to see? Is that going straight back into your pocket, or are you using that to, invest in maybe some other adjustments and upgrades?
Well, for us, any of our energy conservation or water conservation, those kinds of conservation projects that we've undertaken in the past, we always reinvest in the facility. We take those savings, we reinvest them into the facility with upgrades, with new equipment, things that, again, will either save energy or make our lives a little easier. So we take those dollars and reinvest them into the facility.
We, on the other hand, are a for-profit company, and our stockholders like to see that money flow to the bottom line.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question, Miriam with Raffin Company. So, as the Sheraton Hotel, you have quite a bit of square footage that's operated by the guests individually. Do you see that? You also have a fairly sizable square footage that's that you were able to see savings on. Can you see that those savings projected to like a multi-family project or an apartment building where the amenity spaces are smaller?
They showed earlier a savings that they were looking at. Seattle City Lights program did something with the multifamily environment. I think it can be, because there's still a number of common areas that can be done in that, the corridors, should there be any particular community center or whatever built into that. But it becomes, again, scaling the process that out of the 1.1 million square feet, we're only measuring 400,000 because that's what we've got in place. As we delve into this, as we go into our next cycle of renovation work, we anticipate adding controls to our guest room and eventually growing this process to the full 1.1. But it has to be an area that can be managed in some manner. And once you get behind that apartment door, that condominium door, you tend to lose that ability. So it's all in a way you scale it and present it based on space that can be managed centrally.
Thank you.
Okay, unless we have any other questions, I think we've probably reached our point of information saturation for the day. I have just a couple closing remarks. Just some comments kind of from our perspective, again, from PSRC as the host of this workshop. We've heard over and over that commercial buildings nationally waste about $50 billion each year by not taking advantage of energy efficiency tools like these, and municipal buildings are no exception to that. Hopefully this workshop equipped you with some pieces of information to start to address that loss of energy. Some of the takeaways that I have at least is, yes, these tools do save us money, and we have the data to back that up now. That they work in not just large buildings, but those that are a little bit smaller as well. So Seattle's pilot has buildings of a variety of square footage. And I know that was a question that was asked over and over again. And we heard back that yes, it works in at all scales, just past a certain point. And then we have some resources in our area to help. So as far as reducing the risk factor, we have pay-for-performance programs from companies like McDonald Miller and others that allow buildings and organizations to get started on these projects right away and not have to foot the whole bill all at once. We have some incentive programs available from utilities and hopefully more coming in the future. We also have financing support. So I want to call your attention again to the back of the room. We have some resources around grants and loan programs. One of those on this sheet of paper, to your question about multifamily housing, Washington State Department of Commerce, they have our Clean Energy Fund, and there's a couple pieces of that. One, there's a revolving loan fund that can go to support these kind of projects, but there's also specifically money set aside to make ultra efficient, affordable housing. So if you're involved at all in construction of those public developments of housing facilities, that's a resource that you could go to install some of those technologies. And those that have already participated in that may be able to share information about how the tools worked in those types of buildings. Also, I want to call out, and I hope she won't mind, that we have in the room with us Emily Whitman. She works in Senator Cantwell's office, and she has been spearheading the creation of a new grants program to help the senator kind of keep her finger on the pulse of what's happening around the state and keep an eye towards various funds that could go to support those projects. So they're very interested in supporting smart building tools and those programs coming into our area as well as other parts of the state.
Wave your hand, Emily.
And we also obviously have everyone that presented today is available to speak with and learn from their experiences. And lastly, I think we learned that the big key to making this happen is selling it, putting it into terms that's easy to digest and understand from upper management, CFOs, and just anyone in a leadership position, making that easy to grasp. So there's a little bit of translation involved in these types of endeavors. Lastly, I'll plug that Puget Sound Regional Council, we are not the expert in this issue, but we are here to help pull people into the same room and get these conversations going. We are a membership organization and all of you are our members. So we are here to help, and please reach out if you have ideas and we'll see what we can do to get something started. And I should.
And I have one last thing to say. I would really like to do a quick round of applause for Sasha Anderson and Stephanie Gowing, who put all this together.
And a huge thank you to our speakers who took time out of their very busy schedules to be here and give us this valuable information. Thank you.